Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Aries EDC. Today, I want to talk to you about design. It came up in a live stream that I was in the other day, and someone mentioned how they appreciate on my channel how I am pretty transparent on how I'm making the knives that I'm making. And I never really thought about it. I just wanted to share what I'm doing and maybe inspire somebody and show people that this isn't something that's unobtainable. It's something that anybody can do with a little bit of know-how and a little bit of money just to get started. You can make knives, and I've been just trying to share the process, share what I do, because I just I enjoy sharing. I enjoy kind of the teaching process as an educator. I always kind of fall back on that. And it made me think of design and sharing with you guys my process for design and how I kind of do things. You guys know I try to keep things pretty low key. I don't use CAD for design. I don't do anything like that. So I have mentioned before on the channel, I'm inspired by the production knife world. And I take some of the designs that I have, and basically what I do is, if I like a design of, let's say, a pocket knife. So let's say, for instance, the Penguin. Everybody knows QSP Penguin. It's a great blade, a very utilitarian blade shape. This is mine, denim micarta, and this is something I really enjoy carrying. It's a very utilitarian blade shape, and I really like it. So my thought and my process is, all right, well, QSP Penguin, how can I turn that into an EDC fixed blade? If I was to directly copy this design, it's going to be a little bit big, long for EDC carry. The reason it's good for a pocket knife is because you can fold it. But for a fixed blade for EDC, if I was to strictly copy that design, which I don't want to do, I want to come up with my own ideas. And then when you're doing that and laying this blade shape out and then trying to figure out a handle on it, you obviously don't need this area of the pivot. So I kind of cut out this middle part and then go to where the finger choil is. And the design process is trying to take that into inspiration to designing a knife. Or something like the Mini Griptilian. This is my Benchmade Mini Griptilian. Very good blade shape, but I also like the handle shape on this. It's comfortable, and I can, it's a 3-finger, but I can get my pinky in there. So maybe I can marry the two together. So if you look at something like the Rockhopper, it has a very similar blade shape to the Mini Griptilian and the obvious blade shape of the Penguin. So I married those two things, added in a little bit of my own flair to something that is comfortable and usable and is a EDC friendly size. So that's kind of where my inspiration and my design process goes. And it also starts off on paper. So I will make a paper design. Here, let me show you one. So it starts off in paper, and then it moves over into wood. So I'll draw out a design. So this is the thorn, or what was the thorn. You can see it has that little belly right there and the handle, which in the design process I thought would be good. So then I'll draw out my ideas on paper. I will, trace a blade shape, then maybe freehand a handle or gain inspiration for something for a handle. And then I will cut out that, and then I will draw it out on some of this thin ply that I have. Like this is the thorn that I just showed. And then we'll play with it. I don't mess with CAD. I don't do that just because I don't really have a good program. And honestly, I just kind of take it, put it into wood, and the wood gives me a really good idea of how that's going to feel. Originally, I had the little belly in there, and when I had it in wood, it was kind of uncomfortable. So I removed it, and that was better. And then in my brain, can picture once you get the handle scales on it and it's rounded and it gives you something to grab a hold of, I could tell that's going to be comfortable. It's a working blade shape. I can switch all of the different grips that I'm going to be using to cut with, and put it into, I have to put it into something that I can hold and feel in my hand. So like my first design is the Obsession, and that was a complete, this the thing I cut out, and I held this in my hand for hours and hours at a time, obsessing obviously over how this is going to fit in my hand and how that handle is going to be comfortable. Is the blade going to be right where I need it to be? Can my thumb be put in a comfortable place? Can I pinch grip and get in there? Is the tip going to be able to get in there to do any opening the packages or anything else? And that's kind of where it all stems from. Then from the wood, I can transfer this over into the steel. And, draw out, I don't have anything sitting next to me except this. And then I could take that Obsession shape, put it into the steels that I want. And that's when the cutting and shaping and everything else takes place with the steel that I've showed you guys. But it all starts off on paper and then transferred over into a wooden blank. And every design that I've done, I kind of have a wooden blank for, except for the Yocto, which obviously I have discussed on the channel before. This was a collaboration, and Tim, who came up with the design of this, sent me this acrylic blank, which I really like. And I am thinking about how I can try to transfer all of these wood into the acrylic. But right now, I'm kind of working with what works for me. And the wood blanks are working for me. I can change them up if I need to. If I see a design and it's not really working, then I can change it or restart it. For instance, the Cardinal, which is right here. This is a very unique blade shape, and one that was derived from one of my favorite knives, which is the Ferrum Forge Mini Archbishop, or the Civivi, I think it's the Odium. I really love that knife and the blade shape, and the handle is very comfortable actually. So how can I take that and turn it into a fixed blade? So you can see the inspiration to that design. And I'm not trying to, I'm telling you this just so I'm being transparent, but I'm not trying to rip people off. I'm not trying to be a copy, because in the end, my designs do look a little bit different, and definitely, but I'm just trying to, tell you guys my process. But the Cardinal at first was like this. And my first Cardinal did that, but this, when I was doing the wood, it got a little out of hand, and I made little notes on here to round that off a little bit more and to cut off a little bit more of the heel of the blade. And finally I was like, why am I just making notes? I'll just make another blank. So that turned into this, which I feel like is a little bit more friendlier of design, and it flows a little bit better with the handle. So I go with that. And so it's just one of those things, like the bud. I originally had the bud, and the bud again had like a little kind of belly in the handle. And the first one, and there's always one, it's floating out there somewhere, somebody purchased it, it had a little belly. And although it was fairly comfortable, design-wise it looked a little funky. So I decided to remove that, and now the bud is what it is. Actually, I put that as a vote for you guys, and you guys voted to that handle shape was better, which is perfectly fine. So sometimes you guys get a hand in making the design, but I think in my head, I was going to do that anyway. But it's nice to hear your guys' feedback. So these are some of the main designs that I do. And then I'll go in and maybe try to change things up. So like, well, let's see. I have my bloom, but then I see a blade shape that I really want to kind of incorporate. And then I have like a bloom too, where instead of just the nice drop point, I'm doing, I guess you would consider that a Warncliffe, or sheep, I don't know, modified sheep's. Sheep's foot is a little bit stretched, but more of a Warncliffe on that. But trying to keep the same kind of handle style as the bloom. So you can kind of see the similarities, but yet the differences. So I have something like a bloom too, or the puffin, where the puffin is right here. That would be, I guess, a sheep's foot. And then a little bit of a different type of style on the blade. I have the puffin too. And it's just little things that I feel like I can try and play with, and to come up with new things. Sometimes it works, sometimes it really doesn't work. I am a sucker for harpoons, so I have something for the bloom, and then I could do the bloom with a harpoon, which I really like, and it has turned out really well with some of the blades that I've done. So, but the bloom harpoon, this cutout got a little big, and the harpoon gets a little wide here. So that's something that I have to work on with this wooden blank, is trying to shrink that down a little bit, because the bloom is here. You can see how much bigger that is. So that's something I'm playing with. Or I keep it that way. I don't know. It's just, it's fluid. You play with what works. Or like my obsession, and then I did an obsession harpoon. And that actually turned out really well when I made that. So, it's all different things. So these are kind of like the main designs that I have available, and most of the ones that I'll go to first before any of the others that I've really shown. And the Yocto is one that I have a lot of upcoming things coming up for that. And then I get into like some of the other designs, like the gargoyle, which is a design that I came up with as skeletonized, just like the naked column and the creep are all skeletonized versions. The Yocto is also going to have a skeletonized option, but I also have something coming up where I can put scales on it too. And then someone reached out and was like, hey, would you ever do a rock hopper skeletonized? Well, I can do anything skeletonized, I just have to modify the handle a little bit. So really it's kind of all up in the air, and it's fluid, and nothing really changes. So the gargoyle was something that I kind of came up with that was a little bit bigger than the column. Really kind of the excess size for an EDC blade, in my opinion. It gets a little bit big. Anything bigger than that probably would not work too well for EDC, in my opinion. And then someone reached out and they were like, hey, I have one of your gargoyles, I have one of your columns, I have one of your creeps. Do you have anything that is the size of the naked column but has a better blade shape? He liked the blade shape of the gargoyle but the size of the column. So I go back, I come up with a design, and then I have the mini gargoyle, which is a little bit smaller than the regular gargoyle. Or actually the blade is roughly the same. It's a little bit smaller, but the handle is much smaller, and now that is kind of a mixture of the naked column and the gargoyle. So that's going to be a fun project to do for my buddy Eric, who owns 3 of my blades, and so he'll have a 4th one coming up very soon, so we'll make sure I get that to him. Then, you know, I don't always just do small stuff. I have thrown in some larger designs. Just recently, you guys, if you're following, I did the Bloom XL, which again is right there on the cusp of EDC sized. Anything bigger than that, I don't consider EDCing, but maybe you do. I know someone owns a knife that I'm just going to talk about here in a second, and he basically has told me he EDCs that knife, and that is the Stigma. And you can see it's a fairly large blade. Let's see, overall it's about 7 inches overall, and the blade itself is about 3¼ inches long, which doesn't sound big, but to EDC size that blade every day, that's a little big for me, but maybe not for you. So that is the Stigma, and it was just something I was playing with, make something a little bit bigger. Actually, the genesis of this was a buddy of mine. He wanted something, he's a hunter, and he wanted a skinning knife. And he said, oh, I like this one, I like that, but I'm looking for something a little bit bigger. So I kind of drew out something and created this, and that design is really good. Full 4-finger grip, it's very comfortable. I think you have a penetrating point and a nice belly to make any cuts, and it's just a really cool camp knife type thing, I think, in my opinion. But then you have the Stigma. And then I played with something else, which is the full pistol, which I've made a couple. And if you've seen my Damascus pistol with the harpoon, that turned out really cool. So I have a little bit of a harpoon just because, like I said, I'm a sucker for a good harpoon. So that blade shape kind of took shape as well. So I don't just do small stuff. I do a little bit bigger things as well. I mean, not super big, but it's just kind of my style of what I like to do, because this has to be enjoyable for me. And then last of all was the Crow, which is still at heat treating. I'm hoping to get that back very soon so I can finish it for you guys. And this basically, I had a piece of steel laying around and it kind of spoke to me on what I wanted to do. But if you see, I incorporated the handle of the Stigma and the pistol. I just made it a little bit more chunkier so that for this kind of a blade, there's more in your hand to hold on to, because that is giant for me. For me as a knife, that's a giant blade. I don't know what I would do with something this big, but maybe you do. If you're an outdoorsman, camping, you would find a use for that, I'm probably pretty sure. But for me, it was just something fun I was playing with. and I'm enjoying how that one came out, and I can't wait to get it back so I can finish it for you guys. So that's kind of where I am with the design. It starts off on paper and then goes into the wood. And then I can do like little small stuff like the mini obsessions. Like you have the obsession and the mini obsession. We do different options with blade shapes and contouring of that. And then you have the go-to designs that I have, the obsession, a balloon. So you get the idea of all of my options that I have to make and I can go pull from. So it's a nice pile of designs, a nice pile that I can always be like, okay, hey, what haven't I made in a while? Oh, a puffin? Okay, let's make a puffin. Let's try something different and do a puffin too. Let's go back and make another pedal. Perfect little EDC size fixed blade. I haven't done a regular column in a while. Maybe I need to do another regular column. But, you know, I'm kind of playing with this blade shape. It looks a little funky, but when you get it in your hand, it completely 100% makes sense, which a lot of knives do, but some people are focused on the design. But the column is something that actually started, and that blade shape and the handle kind of worked. But I know looking at it, you're looking at that handle and you're like, oh, that's a little odd shaped for a handle, but it actually makes sense once you get it in your hand. So anyway, again, I'm trying to be transparent with all of this, trying to show you guys my process and what I do when it comes to designing a knife and then creating it. And you guys have seen, I'll trace out the blade shape, but it starts with the wood. Actually, it starts with the paper and then goes to the wood. But you see, it starts off it starts off on paper, then it goes to wood, and then it goes into an actual functioning blade. So you have the rock hopper, and then there's my Damascus rock hopper, which you guys have probably seen. And it's a fun process to be able to take something from paper, put it into wood, see how it feels, and then create something like this that is a workable tool and usable. So that is what drives me. That's what I find enjoyable about this process, and something that drives me to grow and be better as a maker with the designs that I enjoy doing. So that's what I have for you guys today. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, leave a comment, or not. That choice is yours.